Welcome in to a very special episode of the NFL War Room Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Stopsky. The Washington Commanders have finally been sold. And with the Dan Snyder era almost in the rearview mirror, it's time to rebuild this once proud franchise. And I've brought in three very special guests to talk about how we can rebuild this franchise to not do too well as a New York Giant fan. I want to see him be great, but at least I want to see him get back to not a 4-win team. So I brought in Tej Seth, the data analyst, data scientist from SumerSports. Tej, how you doing?
Great, yeah, really excited to be here. A great group of people to talk to today.
Sam Wilcots, the NFL analyst, former Bengals safety, the co-host of the Opening Drive on SiriusXM NFL Radio and Believe in Bengals podcast. Sally, how you doing, man?
Matt, hey, doing great. And looking forward to, we get to build our own franchise. Think about it. The Washington Commanders, formerly the Redskins, used to be one of the great, proud franchises in the National Football League. And I think with this ownership change, it has a chance to kind of reclaim some of that glory. So it's just going to be a lot of fun.
And finally, our money guy, the cap analyst and co-host of the PFF Forecast, Brad Spielberger. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Just trying to keep tabs with Justin Herbert, the new richest man in the NFL. But of course, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brad, man, this is twice in 2 weeks. This is becoming a thing now. I should start paying you.
I know, we're hanging out. Hey, it's the worst things to do on a Tuesday night.
That's fair. All right, so let's hop into try to keep this tight. Before we go into anything on rebuilding, we need to figure out the money situation. So, Brad, I'm going to throw this over to you. How are the Commanders looking right now in terms of their cap?
Yeah, one of the healthier cap situations in the NFL. People wondered if maybe Dan Snyder was being a little bit frugal because he knew there was a sale coming. You look at just their total cap space over the next 3 years. They have the 8th most in the NFL with about $235 million. You also look at something like how much money have they prorated, right? So how many signing bonuses and restructures have they done, which of course clears current cap space, but then adds liabilities down the road. They haven't done a lot of that. They have the 7th lowest amount of prorated money. So, they haven't spent in free agency in each of the last 2 years really at all. They are now geared up to, pay some of their homegrown talent, Montez Sweat, Cameron Krill, etc. But also if they want to add a lot more talent, especially if Sam Howell is the guy on his cheap deal, they can do pretty much whatever they want financially.
And we'll get to Sam Howell in a second. But before we get to the quarterback, we have to kind of start with the leadership, right? Solly, what do you feel, or how do you feel about Ron Rivera's job in Washington? Do you think he's done an okay job so far, or do you think it's time to move on to somebody new?
No, I think this year is going to be a true tale, the 2023 season. I think with the hand that he's been dealt, and it hasn't been a good one, he's found a way, I think, to keep this team competitive. Did not like the decision to lean heavily towards Carson Wentz. I think there was a real body of work there to show you that they were going to be able to do is just trade even. But let's face it, they've been able to build one of the best defenses in the National Football League. And despite not having the presence at the quarterback position, got a bad break, remember, with the injury to Alex Smith. And since then, they've just kind of been trading even. But yet this is a team that's been competitive. One of the teams that beat the Philadelphia Eagles with Jalen Hurts under center head-to-head now. So this is it's a much better team than I think the record would show. But I think it starts with Ron Rivera's got his fingerprints all over the defense. And every year they're right around top 5, certainly one of the better defenses in the National Football League. So I think 2023 is going to be a real tale for the Josh Harris ownership group.
What do you think, or what do you think the record have to be for Coach Rivera to keep his job? Or do you think that with new ownership, it just really doesn't matter unless he wins the Super Bowl? Coach Rivera is probably going to be out.
I think I don't want to go with a number. But I will tell you this. No team has won back-to-back division titles in the NFC division in over the last 18 years. So that tells you all 4 teams are going to be in play. We're probably going to get a new division champion. The Eagles, I think, last did it in 04, 05, back-to-back. But the Eagles, I think, are favored to win it. But I think the Washington Commanders really match up very well against a really good, talented roster in the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they match up very well against Dallas. It's going to be about the quarterback play of Sam Howell If Eric Bieniemy can blend a really good power run game, get play action pass, RPOs, and really get Sam Howell to perform above expectation, then I don't think any of us are going to look to fire Ron Rivera if they contend for a division title with Sam Howell as their starting quarterback.
Now, Sal, I know EB is one of your close friends. We've seen what he can do under Coach Andy Reid. What should Commanders fans expect out of their new offensive coordinator?
I could tell you some of the things that you saw in Kansas City were very subtle. I don't think there's any coincidence, and I give Andy Reid all the credit in the world. He's got a large body of work for himself that speaks to how great he is as a coach. But never has he gone to a conference championship game 5 straight years, even when he was in Philly. But he did do that with Eric Bieniemy as his offensive coordinator, went to a Super Bowl in 3 of the last 4 years. One of the reasons why it happened, if you go back to 2017, this was the year before Eric Bieniemy became the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. There was a guy by the name of Matt Nagy. Remember that name? Because he's the coordinator again with the Chiefs. But it was his last year as a coordinator before he became the head coach with the Chicago Bears. They're playing in a playoff game. They've got this thing all sewn up. They have won the division again. They're playing the Tennessee Titans. And you know what? The leading rusher in the league that year was a guy by the name of Kareem Hunt, who had been a rookie that Eric Bieniemy had hand-chosen out of the University of Toledo in the 3rd round, by the way, and got first-round production out of him, led the league in rushing as a rookie. He doesn't get the ball again the entire second half. Between Andy Reid and Matt Nagy calling plays, I don't know what happened there, but I remember talking to him, and he had just gotten the offensive coordinator job that offseason. I said, you can never let that happen again. You cannot let Andy get away from the run game. And that's what you saw happen in the Super Bowl. They're down by 10 to the Philadelphia Eagles. The only way they were going to be able to stand up to a defense that had 70 sacks during the regular season, yeah, you needed to protect Mahomes, but the way they did it was by continuing to stick with the run game, to keep that defense off balance. And then Patrick Mahomes, I thought it was the best game I had ever saw him play. He did what you need great quarterbacks to do. But the play callers in the game gave him a game plan to help manage that defense, to protect the quarterback, keep the defense off balance. And it is the use of the run game, the power run game, being physical, protecting a defense when they're less than at their best. And it helps you to be able to protect the quarterback. It opens up play action pass. It opens up the RPO scheme. That's what I expect to see from Eric Bieniemy. And I do think they're going to get, I'm telling you, they're going to get something out of Sam Howell. And it'll be interesting to see how far they can go with it.
Tej, analytically, statistically, how well did Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid do together in Kansas City?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up. I think that a combination of the two was the best, if not, top 3 play callers in Kansas City. When you even adjust for the strength of the roster, what they had a really good offensive line. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. We've seen other play callers not make it work as well with top 5 quarterbacks. We've seen Justin Herbert have some struggles this year, even though I think a lot of us think he's a top 5 quarterback, but his play calling wasn't good. So we can see that sometimes play callers mess up really good quarterbacks, but in Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy's case, they schemed up a passing offense that focused a lot on Travis Kelce this year. They were able to adjust losing one of the best receivers in the NFL in an offense that they got so used to doing so. And I think the really interesting thing is last year they started increasing their usage in 12 and 13 personnel. They started putting 2 tight ends or 3 tight ends out on the field. And that's really where we saw them be really efficient. And that was kind of their counterpunch to all the 2 high safety looks they were seeing. So I think if you see a similar trend from Bieniemy in Washington where he shows he can adjust based on his personnel, based on the looks that the offense is seeing, then you can really start to get some confidence about them.
Brad, moving over to the front office a bit, Jason Wright, Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, because we all know Ron has a big say in what happens in the front office. How do you feel they've done so far in terms of picking players, negotiating contracts? Have they been kind of middle of the road? Have they been a little better? than average, or they've been a little below average in terms of the league?
It was interesting. There's actually a lot of good there, right? I mean, I think you do always have the perception of the Washington Commanders and the organization, and of course, it's earned in many ways. But Rob Rogers, their cap guy, is actually very creative. Has put some interesting language. I won't go super into the weeds, but they are different. They do things differently than other teams. How they protect themselves, how they are able to move cap dollars around if they need to. I think the biggest thing for them also was they kind of never got the early extensions done. They were always waiting till the last minute, franchise tagging players 1 time, 2 time, etc. And we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles a bunch. Maybe the biggest edge they have in the entire NFL is they get their guys signed early. You get a discount. You got Jordan Mailata making $16 million a year, Josh Sweat making $13 million a year. I could name 10 players. And so I think that was their biggest drawback is not being proactive and getting deals done. But I'll tell you, they are a good drafting team. They have been for a very long time. And I think the biggest thing you see with them is in the trenches in particular, which, I still think is how you win and lose football games for the most part in this league. Their offensive line drafting has been phenomenal for a long time. And obviously, it was 4 first-round picks in a row, but they hit on all 4 of them, if we get a healthy Chase Young. So kind of a convoluted answer there, but they're not terrible. They're not bad at what they do. I think the beauty of bringing in a Josh Harris, a more progressive and an owner that's going to do things outside the box is you're going to see them get more and more advantages and take, find these edge cases and take advantage of them. I'm not worried about their roster construction or management much at all. I think it's a few things to clean up and they could be, right back in the mix.
And Brad, I will say this, and I think to Brad's point, there has been a disconnect, right, between what the coaching staff and what scouts and their reports may have the coaching in terms of who they would like to acquire, how quickly they would like to move on contracts. When you have this separation between your coaching staff, the executives, and then the ownership, right, who has to approve those purchases. And that's what you had with Daniel Snyder, particularly with over the last 2 to 3 years. And when they have to sit and wait, what are we going to do with Chase Young? Are we going to pick up his 5th-year option or not? And as you get closer to that date, you see that it doesn't get done. One might argue that it was the thing to do when you consider his lack of production over the last 2 years, only 12 games played, missed a lot of action since he was Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2020. But you would like to see them making decisions more definitively and with more authoritative zeal. And that's not something you've seen. And I do think that disconnect between ownership and the executive level and the coaching, I think it had a lot to do with it.
And just real quick, Matt, you might be trying to move on here, but I mean, Josh Harris with the Philadelphia 76ers, at least from what we can tell from the outside, he empowers his front office and steps away, right? I mean, you had the process, the infamous process of the Sixers with Sam Hinkie. I'm sure he was confused what was going on and maybe didn't love every move, but he trusted it. He let them do their thing. And yeah, we know Dan Snyder was making draft picks, making free agent signings. It's just kind of hard to balance those things. I think it's a great point, Solid.
And Brad, one more thing to you before we go out to the roster here. We don't know what's going to happen with this front office and coaching staff, but if they do get let go, is there anybody out there right now that you feel is waiting in the wings to become a general manager that you'd be keeping an eye on to possibly take over the Commanders or whatever their name is in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take a massive swing, especially because it's in your division, I still think Will McClay in Dallas might be the secret sauce of that organization and is one of the better talent evaluators in all of football. And obviously, the added benefit of poaching him from Dallas is always a nice thing to do. I've heard Ian Cunningham's name come up a bunch. He's right now the assistant GM with the Chicago Bears, spent time with Philadelphia and the Baltimore Ravens, a former offensive lineman. I'm not sure if he played in the NFL, but a former high-level football player and a guy that everyone you talk to just raves about him. There are definitely some good candidates. It was a small pool this year. I want to say 3, maybe 4 new GMs. They have options, and then head coach. I'll let Tej wax poetic about Ben Johnson if he would like to do so.
Yeah, you read my mind there. You read my mind. I'll also throw in Alec Hallaby from the Eagles for possible GM. Added benefit of poaching from division again, like you mentioned, Brad. But yeah, I mean, Ben Johnson would be my top head coaching candidate this year. I think that the biggest thing that you can have on a coaching staff right now is an offensive play caller advantage. You look at the teams that have made conference championships, the teams that have made the divisional round last year. 7 of the 8 teams to make it to the divisional round had an offensive focused head coach. The Bills were the only team to not make that. And we know Ken Dorsey might be a head coach eventually. So I think Ben Johnson would be the top choice from a head coaching perspective. But I think, like Brad mentioned, like the head coaching pool is much deeper than the GM pool right now. So if the Commanders were going one direction or the other, I think the head coaching one would be an easier path to start with.
Sally, what do you think? Hand it off to EB if Coach Rivera goes away, or are you going to fight for Lou Aronimo?
I'm going to fight for Eric Bieniemy first and foremost, and I think basically, and that's what this year is really going to be about. I think we all know this is a huge audition year for him because for whatever reason, he didn't seem to get the same credit for whatever the team was able to accomplish or the Chiefs' offense, whatever they were able to do in the 5 years under Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid. He didn't seem to get the same kudos that, say, a Matt Nagy received when he was the offensive coordinator, or even Doug Peterson, right? When he was the offensive coordinator under Andy Reid, or any of the other coordinators going back all the way to the days of John Gruden when he served as offensive coordinator under Andy Reid back in Philadelphia. For whatever reason, I think people were waiting to see him make an impact. I know him as a person. I know him as a coach. I know what he did for those Kansas City Chiefs team. He brings a level of toughness to an offense that is seldom seen, and a really a tough-minded mentality where you see these average running backs playing at such a level that really belies their draft grade. And so I think you're going to see what he's able to do. For me, at the executive level, I think it starts with the ability to know where the coaches are. I don't think in our league we talk enough about how coaching is really the life's blood of NFL franchises. Yeah, you need someone who can help you pick the players. You need people to go out and find the players. But once you get them, you need people to be able to develop them. And I remember when the Washington Commanders had this sort of cauldron of coaches that saw under Mike Shanahan, not only Kyle Shanahan on that staff, Matt LaFleur was on that staff. Kevin O'Connell was on that staff. Sean McVay was on that staff. And Daniel Snyder let them all out the building. Didn't even recognize what he had. And I do believe that Mike Shanahan he's a Hall of Fame coach in my book, but for a lot of reasons. But he brings with him a certain system of understanding the passing game, but also how to integrate the run game and how to elevate the play at the most important position in our game, and that's the quarterback. And you saw that happen with Mr. Irrelevant and Brock Purdy last year in San Francisco. But Mike Shanahan, now Kyle is doing it in San Francisco, but if you look behind the curtain, guys, there's a guy back there pulling the levers, even from the time Kyle was hired in San Francisco. The whisperer in the ear of Jed York has been and still is the great Mike Shanahan. And he was once with the Commanders. If I had an organization, he's my Jerry West, okay? He's the guy that I want in the organization, and I'm going to marry him with some of the great names that I think you guys have mentioned already as a general manager. You saw him do that with John Lynch. I'm going to marry him with some of these great young general managers, and then he's going to build us this pipeline of young coaches that are going to grow and develop the talent as well as coaches themselves. And that's how you end up having these great franchises that go on runs, but also end up having this coaching tree where guys are coming out of there and doing great things. And I think Mike Shanahan is still that great resource in our league today.
I love that. I think that's a great pick. And kind of jumping off here, going into the quarterback conversation, right? Yeah. Sam Howell seems like he's going to get the nod. I liked Sam Howell coming out of UNC. Obviously, the NFL did not. He's why he went in the 5th round. Yeah. And he's got Jacoby Brissett right behind him. So it's kind of a 2-part question for you guys. A, what are you expecting out of Sam Howell? And then B, if you were on this coaching staff, Jacoby Brissett did a pretty good job last year filling in Cleveland. He probably would give you a better chance of winning right now. Would you, knowing that your job is probably on the line, would you play a Brissett over a Sam Howell? Or would you stick it out with the young guy and see what happens? Tay, I'll start with you.
I think it's really interesting. If you had a first-year head coach there, I think Sam Howell plays the whole year, because either outcome is good for you as a first-year head coach. Either Sam Howell doesn't, lives up to his fifth-round draft status, doesn't play that well, not starting caliber, and you have a top 5 pick. You're looking at Caleb Williams or Drake May in the top 5 there, and I think that's something to be really excited about. Or Sam Howell is even an average to above average quarterback, which on his salary will be giving you one of the best surplus values in the entire NFL. So I really like those range of outcomes there. But since we're in Ron Rivera's, later into his tenure with Washington, I think that Sam Howell might only get a leash of 5 or 6 games. And if it doesn't work out, there's a reason why Jacoby Brissett, like you mentioned, who was pretty good in Cleveland last year, will end up getting the nod, because they want to get to 8-9 wins, which is something that they can show the ownership group that was a successful season. They had a winning record. Maybe they were in the mix for the wild card spot, like the 7 seed, and didn't end up getting it. So I think just because of the situation with Ron Rivera being later into his tenure with Washington, that he won't necessarily get Sam Howell won't necessarily get the full opportunity.
Sally, what do you think?
Look, I think there are multiple scenarios. This is not just this binary thing about Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett, because I think you could play them both and end up with similar outcomes. In other words, you could play them both, win 8 or 9 games, not make the playoffs, end up getting fired, right? And you're not going to get a high draft pick. The owner's not going to have it. Or even with both guys as quarterbacks, you could end up not having a great season, still getting fired, and maybe getting a higher pick. I just firmly believe that as you're building through the season, you have to be building and developing something. And I just believe that Jacoby Brissett, for me, as much as I like him, I still put him in that category, say, with a Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to make it interesting. He's going to make it fun. But you're not going to go to the playoffs with him. He's not going to take you. He's going to tease you just enough, and he'll get you maybe to 500, but not anything beyond that. But I do believe if you've got a Sam Howell out there and you're trending toward 500 or above, or just a skosh above that, you're building something. You're developing a young quarterback. You're developing a football team. That means your defense is playing well around the young rookie quarterback. You and I both know it doesn't end well for Ron Rivera if they're drafting for Caleb Williams next year. So, that's why I say it's more than just the 2 binary choices of these 2 quarterbacks. At some point, if you're not winning in the first half of the season, even the new ownership group is going to have to start looking to the future and say, okay, maybe now we position ourselves to get a quarterback in next year's draft. That's what we saw with Mr. Irsay and the Indianapolis Colts last year. All of us know, as much as we love Jeff Saturday, that was tacitly tanking. That I'm going to go out and hire someone who's never coached in the league before. He's going to try hard, but he's going to get me that 4th overall pick. I know he will. And Jeff Saturday delivered for his old owner, Jim Irsay.
That the Irsay thing was one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever seen. I remember we both worked for SiriusXM. I remember when that broke, it was like none of the hosts can make any
you can't make it
ups
up
or down with it. It was just what was it? It seemed like it was like I have a video game. It seemed too ridiculous to happen, and it was. I know that there were some older coaches on the radio that were pretty pissed off with that move. Yes. It also did not end well. And now we'll see what happens with the Colts. Brad, to you, I know as a money guy, Sam Howell doing well would be incredible, right? Because that opens up so many options that we can do team building wise. But what would you do here? If you're Ron Rivera.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I do think sometimes we get caught up in, what have you done for me lately? Where he was the year before he came out of college, he was getting projected as the number 1 overall pick in a bunch of mock drafts. And obviously, things are going to vary in your final college season. But he did lose, I think, 2 starting offensive linemen to the NFL. I think 2 starting receivers to the NFL as well. And that makes a big difference, right? So I would probably start out with him. I'm a huge Jacoby Brissett guy. I wanted them to start him right away, but it does sound like there's kind of a steady drumbeat of positivity surrounding Sam Howell. And at first I kind of was skeptical and thought maybe it was just your usual, pumping positivity, but it's starting to sound like it's real, and I think he could be a guy. So I would give him the first nod. I agree, though, a fairly short leash to go to Jacoby Brissett. And I'll say this, too, kind of plays in for both of those guys. I think Eric Bieniemy is not going to shy away from running both of these quarterbacks. I mean, neither of them are, Lamar Jackson, but Howell certainly can run, and Jacoby Brissett on short yardage is one of the best, quarterback sneakers of all time. So I think you can get creative, especially down the red area, do different things. And, maybe it does expose a guy missing some time with a short-term injury, stuff like that. I think they're going to, the playbook is going to be expansive, but I do think, I guess, you start with Howell because you might as well, like Sally said, I think we to a degree know who Jacoby Brissett is. You got to at least see what you have in Sam Howell and then go from there.
All right, here's the fun part. Actually, again, to rebuild this team a little bit. Brad, I'm going to start with you because the first question, I'm going to kind of merge these questions here. Chase Young, they declined his fifth-year option. Great rookie year, has kind of fallen off with injuries. Part one, what do you do with Chase Young? Do you retain Chase Young? Is it even worth retaining Chase Young considering the money they already have in that defensive line? And then are there any players on this team that you feel are either should be let go or maybe shopped around because they're not performing up to their dollar amount, or if this roster is not a very good roster, at least in my opinion. I think it's like a 4 or 5 win roster. Are there any players on here that you feel have some trade value that you can maybe get something back for that you would want to ship out and not really bring into this next phase of the rebuild?
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is I think the entire Chase Young conversation hinges on whether or not Montez Sweat gets an extension, before week 1 kicks off. Because if he doesn't, you then have 2 players going into contract years, and you only have 1 franchise tag at your disposal. And I know Sweat hasn't shown up great in traditional stats. I don't think he has a 10-sack season yet, but had over 60 pressures last year, had I think a top 15 pass rush win rate, top 20 maybe, among edge rushers in the NFL last year. He's a good football player. You could certainly make a case for, especially if you get it done before Nick Bosa, before Brian Burns or Sean Gary, Josh Allen, etc. You maybe get yourself a good deal in place there, and then you can't pay all 4. I think you certainly can pay 3. Even if they do extend Montez Sweat, it's probably going to be cheaper than Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead in San Francisco. So you can't have just an elite unit up front. With Chase Young, I think you need to be open to every single possibility, including, let's say he starts off the season well, is playing good football, but you're 1-6. Is someone offering you a great trade deadline package for half a season of Chase Young where it's better than a compensatory pick and you didn't extend Montez Sweat, so you can't guarantee you can franchise tag him? I think you have to consider taking that trade at the deadline. Let's say they do extend Montez Sweat, so you have the franchise tag at your disposal. You can tag him, but still shop him in a trade, right? And do a tag and trade. It's not going to prevent any team from trading for him because they're obviously going to give him an extension the day he arrives anyway. So, not really a straightforward answer, but I think that the key is don't pigeonhole yourself in any Chase Young decision. Look, rookie of the year for a reason. He was phenomenal coming out of college, obviously. He still shows up very well when he does play. Obviously, he's missed 22 games the last 2 years, but you just need to be open-minded to every possibility because it really could go a million different ways.
Tej, what about you, man? What do you think?
I have a very similar line of thinking to Brad. I would try to keep as much of that defensive line together as I can because we've seen the Commanders now where they feel like their defensive line's in a good spot. They spent both their first and second round draft picks this year on defensive backs, so they're trying to build that area of the defense. And I think, like Brad mentioned, if you can pair both of those sides together, and you're talking about one of the best defenses in the NFL, one of the more talented defenses in the league. So I would try to just keep as much of that core group together as I can. I really think it starts with the defensive line. And based on how Chase Young does this year, when he plays, we know that he's going to be one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy or not. So I think it's pretty dependent on that. But this is he's the type of player that the tag is there for, a player where you need to see one more year of him and you need to see if they're going to stay healthy or if they're going to be able to prove it to you or not. So I think that's what Washington is going to end up doing with him.
So think about it, guys. Chase Young was drafted in 2020, right? Same year as Jordan Love, same year as Justin Herbert, same year as Joe Burrow. In fact, he and Joe Burrow were teammates at Ohio State. in every single one of those cases, those players, those teams picked up the 5th-year option. Now I get it. Chase Young has been hurt. He's only played in 12 games over the last 2 seasons, but 1.5 sack in those 12 games. There's something that this football team knows about him, and they feel very precarious, very uncertain. Or they would have picked up the 5th-year option. So I think that already tells us how they feel about it in terms of where the decision is. The problem is, if you wait till halfway through the season to trade him, I don't know that you're going to get fair value. I think if you trade him during camp before the season even starts, I think you can get a great deal for him, to be honest with you. Now, I can tell you right now, I'm the first who are so reluctant to trade what I think could be a transcendent pass rusher. You guys know they don't. They're not. Born on trees. You don't find them often. That's how we felt when the Raiders traded away Khalil Mack. Like, what are you doing? They haven't been able to replace him. I know Max Crosby's come on as of late, but you got to be certain on this because you're right. He was good during his rookie campaign. There's got to be something. And I know he's been injured, but even when he's come back and has been able to play, he has not been productive. They've got to be able to dial in because they either have to be all in with Chase Young or not in at all. And if you're not in at all, I think you got to trade him before the start of the season. If you try to wait to the deadline, you're putting the other team in a really tough spot to be able to trade for him, give you assets, and have to give him a new contract. And so I think to be able to expect to get great return, I think it would have to start before the start of the season. We've seen deals get done during that time frame, but I think that's when they would have to get it done. So they've got to make a choice. They've got to be either all in on Chase Young or not at all. But you cannot do this halfway. I think you're going to use the tag on him. I think they would have come out cheaper just by doing the 5th-year option and securing him for 2 more years as opposed to 1.
All right, on to my favorite part of this, because there's a lot of negative that goes into rebuilding, right? Because it's, I'll say in order to get to rebuild, you got to suck for a good amount of time, right? You have to be pretty bad, and the Commanders have been really bad at every level, right? Their stadium's falling apart, almost killed the quarterback. It's I'm sure you guys have seen the videos of like brown water falling on fans' heads in the stadium. Like, the Commanders have been really bad. Yeah, as a Giant fan, it didn't really bother me. But in order to get to this point, it's been, it has a lot of negative. To switch over to the positive side, are there any players, whether it be free agency, trade, the draft, that you'd be looking at if you were the GM, or what would be the first position group that you're really attacking and you feel you have a chance to build quickly? Sally, I'll start with you.
Look, I think the offensive line can stand to be better. I think, this is a team that used to have a guy by the name of Trent Williams at the tackle position. He no longer even wanted to be there. But they find themselves, I think, in an offensive line. I think they're mediocre. There's times when they put it together and play well. But the position that really changes things, because we could all say, hey, go get the quarterback, and we'd be right. They've got to secure that position in order to reshape the franchise. I just think that's just realistic. Look at who you're playing against, even within your own division. But with that, you better have a playmaker at the wide receiver position. This league is about guys who can uncover, guys who can make plays repeatedly, week in and week out, guys who can win against double coverage. And as much as I like their trio of receivers, Terry McLaurin is special, but he's not wide receiver 1 special like what we would see what A.J. Brown did for the Titans. And then as soon as he came over to the Eagles, you saw how aggressive the Eagles had to become, because you know why? They had spent multiple draft picks trying to find that one receiver, right? They had gone through a number of different guys with high draft picks, first-round picks, second-round picks. While we love Devontae Smith, none of us thought that the move to go get A.J. Brown was an overkill. In fact, hey, if you think you're good, get better in that area, because it's going to make your offense better. It's going to make your quarterback better. And so as much as I love Terry McLaurin, I love Jahan Dotson. I think he's going to be even better year 2. I want to see more out of Chris Samuel, by the way. I know he's a dual threat guy, runner, receiver, but I need more. And more importantly, I just need more explosive production out of the passing game. And it starts with, I think, adding playmakers around the quarterback, particularly when you haven't really found out who that quarterback is going to be.
So I love the receiver talk, and Mike Renner made this point back when I used to work with him, and I thought it was always interesting, talking about corners and receivers, right? When you add a top-level corner receiver, you're not just improving one spot, right? You're improving three different spots.
Exactly.
Right? If you add a top-level receiver, Terry McLaurin becomes number 2 receiver, and Dots becomes your 3 receiver, all of a sudden now you have a great receiving group, right? Same thing with corners, right? If you add a great corner, your second corner and your third corner are just automatically better because of the depth, right? With the offensive line, they cut Andrew Norwell like 2 days ago, which I know he's not the same player he used to be when he was an all-pro, but this is not really a team that I felt could just give away talent. What do you feel, like? How do you feel about that? Is that something like, what, Norwell's is kind of down, it's not a big deal, or were you the same kind of bandwagon, like, this, why?
Well, they signed him to a 2-year deal. They kept him only for 1 year. I know the kid very well because he went to the local high school. The office that I'm sitting in right now, he grew up right here in the neighborhood. I know his family very well. And he's an interior offensive lineman who may have slowed down a little bit. But you're right. I don't know that they're so good. Because to me, right, you got to get through camp. You need bodies to do all of that. But sometimes, NFL teams, if you get hurt in camp, now they owe you the rest of the money. So they may have been safeguarding for some cap reasons or whatever. I just think they need greater resources across the offensive line. But you're right. I do think you need these force multipliers that can come in, particularly at the wide receiver position, that make your quarterback better. We saw A.J. Brown improve and help Derrick Henry in the run game when he was in Tennessee. If you have to face a light box in the run game because you've got that really bona fide threat on the perimeter in the passing game, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a force multiplier at the wide receiver position. And right now, I as much as I love Terry McLaurin, I do. I just don't think they have that kind of receiver right now on this roster.
I agree with you. I do like Terry, but I do think that he's maybe a rung below like a guy like A.J. Brown. Brad, over to you, man. Who would you be adding free agency trade draft, or is there a group that you would be targeting immediately?
Yeah, I love that discussion, but I think it's offensive tackle and kind of by a decent margin here, in part because I do think, Olu Fashanu, Penn State, Joe Alt, Notre Dame, even maybe J.C. Latham, Alabama, I think all three could be like really good, bookends in the NFL. And I think they're going to be picking high enough, the Commanders, to probably get one of them. So, look, Charles Leno is a super reliable veteran. He basically has not missed a game his entire career, but he's going to be 33 years old in 2024, and also has showed a couple signs of slowing down a little bit. I know you add Andrew Wiley from the Chiefs, but we kind of forget he was, a backup, essentially kind of your sixth offensive lineman for stretches, played some guard, can do different things. For me, it's tackle. You have Sam Cosmi now, who I guess will play guard. Maybe you replace Andrew Norwell. You sign Nick Gates. You draft Ricky Stromberg out of Arkansas in the 3rd round this year. So I think you have some pieces in place. But just like we're talking about other units, I think if you add a legit bookend elite left tackle potentially, that strengthens the entire unit. And then very quickly we're talking about, like you said, average unit. They're not bad, but could quickly become one of the better cores in the NFL. That's personally where I would go.
And Tej, over to you. I love asking analytics guys this question because they always come with something interesting. So don't let us down here, Tej. I'm putting a lot of pressure on you to come with something good. Well, who were you added?
Yeah, I mean, I love both of the answers that Brad and Sully already gave. So more slim pickings here for me to choose from. But something that immediately jumped out to me with the Commanders roster is tight end. I think Logan Thomas is okay, but like a lot of the stuff we talked about at the beginning with Bieniemy possibly wanting to increase the amount of tight ends that they use on the field is something that I think could be interesting. So, when you look at I prefer going and getting tight ends through free agency because we usually see them hit their peak later than most positions. So when you look at some of the free agents available next year, like Dalton Schultz could be someone that they could go after who I really like a lot. Noah Fant from Seattle as well will be someone available. So like those are two possible options there. But if they want to go through the draft, Brock Bowers is the obvious choice, but he's probably going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. So they might be wanting to use that on a quarterback if they were in that situation. I like Jatavian Sanders at Texas a lot. I think he's going to be one of probably the tight end 2 that gets selected last year. So I could watch out for him being taken in the middle of the first round.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. We're kind of up against the clock here. Real quick, Brad Spielberger, cap analyst for PFF, co-host of the PFF Forecast. I saw you even release an article kind of detailing exactly what we just talked about today. So go check it out. Brad, is there anything else the audience should know about where they can find your work?
Yeah. Also, if we're talking roster construction and salary cap and all that, you can go overthecap.com and find every single detail on everything you could possibly imagine. Can't recommend it enough.
And then data scientist Tej Seth of SumerSports. So you can find his work there. And also, I see you're now you're filling in for Eric Eager because he's becoming lazy. So you gotta be the podcast host now. I get it. What should the audience know about you? I know you had a paper published not too long ago.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. Be sure to check out the SumerSports show where I try to match, half of the production that Eric and Thomas give on Mondays, but I usually do the Wednesday shows. And then the paper right now is like, you have to pay for it to read it, but hopefully eventually there'll be some free way to read it. So, just check my Twitter for that.
And what is it about? Like, let the audience know.
Yeah, so it's about the trade-off that linebackers have to make between stopping the run and biting on play action. We see that both of those metrics are correlated. The distance that a linebacker will travel to stop the run is correlated with how much they bite on play action. But there's certain linebackers like Dante Hightower, who just recently retired, who was able to see that trade-off where he could cover the run really well, but also not bite on play action. And so that was really interesting to look at which linebackers were doing that, which kind of schemes that these linebackers were playing in. Devin White and Levante David play either role where one of them covers the run, one of them bites on play action. So it was all stuff on linebackers.
And that's done using the tracking data, right?
Yes, it is using the tracking data where each player's location is tracked every 10th of a second on the field.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then Solomon Wilcots, the NFL analyst and the co-host of the Opening Drive for SiriusXM and the host of Believe in Bengals. Solly, where can the audience find your great work?
Well, obviously, you can tune in to SiriusXM NFL Radio Channel 88 from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time every single morning, Monday through Friday. And obviously, the Believe in Bengal podcast, wherever you get your podcast. We actually simulcast it on Bally Sports Ohio if you're in the Ohio area. But yeah, you can find us on the Believe in Bengal podcast as well. I can tell you this. I'm just really honored to be able to work with you guys today. I love guys who come from another angle in covering our game. And so I love mixing the data analytics with some of the raw football stuff that someone like myself bring as a former player. I do want to challenge the data community, though, to let's begin to talk a little bit more about what we call positionless football players, because I do think Micah Parsons is hitting on something when he says that Travis Kelce, who's played like he's the 23rd, he would be ranked 23rd amongst his pay with wide receivers, but he's outperforming every single one of them. And Micah, what he's really doing is putting the spotlight on himself. Remember, he was drafted as an off-ball linebacker. He shows up his rookie year, a pass rusher gets hurt. He tells the coach, I'll do it. And then he gets double-digit sacks every single year. They can't stop the guy. So is he like Lawrence Taylor? Is he a defensive end? Or is he a linebacker? Or is he something else? I don't know. But I guarantee you the teams are going to say, no, you're a linebacker because what? They get to keep the pay down a little bit. So I think we're going to have to kind of come up with some metrics to kind of help him to be able to get some fair compensation. But I think that's going to be an interesting conversation moving forward.
It's funny you mentioned that, not to go on a tangent or anything, because we got to get out of here soon. But Brad and I spoke about this last week about the Saquon Barkley deal and how we need to start moving away from running back, receiver, tight end, and as being offensive weapon.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing on the defensive side, especially outside of D tackles, right? Because those guys are essentially playing either somewhere across the defensive line. But a lot of these guys now are positionless, and you're seeing guys like Isaiah Simmons, who is playing all over the field. Micah Parsons is playing all over the field. Travis Kelce playing all over the field. And it's I think you're starting to see it with obviously analysts like you, Solly, and analysts guys like Tej, but the money hasn't caught up yet. So it's all blame Brad. And that's the reason why I haven't gotten paid yet. But I do think that this move into positionless football outside of quarterbacks is definitely on the horizon. So Tej, I'm looking forward to your next article and thesis paper on this. Let me know when I can expect it.
I appreciate the idea. It's super interesting to look at. I think Deebo Samuel, Micah Parsons, Travis Kelce, like there's just so many ways to approach it. And
that's right.
I think Kyle Shanahan's overall vision is that everyone's a positionless player for him at the end of the day. So
yeah, that's right.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I'll be talking to you all soon. I'll be following Brad's Twitter updates because I'm sure we'll be getting a bunch of contract updates in the next 30 minutes. But guys, thank you so much again for doing this, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, guys. All the best.
Thank you.